start. So hi everyone, on-site and online. Welcome to this SHARC session. Happy to see you. And my name is Laurence Mabille. I will be co-chairing this session with those nice people here, almost all of them. So there will be Florencia Grattarola. Maybe you can stand up. Yeah. From Biodiversity Data and the University of Life Sciences in Prague. Anna Shmagun, yes, who is online, and she's from Kisti in Korea. Chris Herman, who is from the MG Fox Foundation, and Anne Cambon Thompson and Moens Thompson, and me, we are from the at the University of Science in Toulouse, France, and that is also affiliated to INSEAD. To start with very quick practical information. So this session is meant to be an interactive session, working session, and we'd like very much to be able to track your feedback. So please, if you can open the meeting notes, the collaborative meeting notes, so you can put your feedback there. Another way is to put it on through the Hoover application into the chat of the session page. And for the online people, you can do that on the chat. We'll be tracking this too. And the last way is to do it verbally. We will have dedicated moments for that during the session. Thanks in advance. Now a bit of context. So the SHARC group, the Sharing Rewards and Credit Interest Group, is an interdisciplinary group that was created some time ago now, a few years ago, to foster the implementation of rewarding path for initially for data sharing activities and now more for open science activities, including data and code sharing, and to encourage the adoption of those activities in the research evaluation process at different levels. And the idea is to provide guidance, recommendations for researchers and to critical actors in the academic rewarding scheme. So to do that, we have created a dedicated working task to develop this guidance, which first work was a survey to identify perception and expectations of various research communities regarding how open science activities such as data sharing are or should be taken into consideration and rewarded. And this survey was conducted between April and October last year. We got 230 responses from about 37 countries across 5 continents. And actually, we presented some of those results in the last plenary. And those results, the results from this survey, actually, we've used them as a basis to build a first draft of recommendation that we will present in a moment. Because the rewarding scheme, they depend upon several stakeholders, we have not provided one recommendation, but a set of recommendations that include kind of practical guidance towards already existing rewarding pathways to get kind of recognition at the individual level, so that will be for researchers, and a set of recommendations at upper levels to key actors in the academic rewarding scheme. And along those guidelines, we have developed a list of resources, of already existing resources that are referred to in the different recommendations. So we will move through all the sections of the recommendations. So to start with guidance for researchers, and then recommendation to institutions, funders, publishers, policymakers. So for each part, There will be a 5 minutes presentation of the key elements of the guideline, and about 10 minutes discussion with you, question-mediated discussion, and then a little at the end of possible. So have in mind that we want to present and discuss with you the content of the different sections of the recommendations, but we want also to improve the resources we have. So with useful examples of ongoing initiatives, policies, tools that you may know. We would like also to have your ideas on how to better communicate this kind of recommendations. So, for instance, how to build a user-friendly guidance for academics, and how to reach out actively the various actors needed in the rewarding system. Okay, so I think I leave the floor to Florencia for the guidance researchers. Thank you.
Something that is in the middle. Hello everyone, I'm Flo for short, which is easier also. And so here I'm going to present the first level of recommendations we are thinking of. So this would be the researchers. And so this is the idea of this is what you have to do in a way in order to maybe also increase the possibility of rewards or incentives. So we have a couple of tables actually, which I will show you the QR code, and we also have them in the collaborative notes, so you would be able to find them there. So the first thing about researchers, and this is very important, and we've seen this we are from different countries and we have different policies. We have each institution has a different policy. So the first one is be aware of them, because you might skip some things that are part of the policies in your institution, in your country, in your region. So let's hope this works. So you can access that here. So this is we would also want more examples here, but this is a list from very different regions, and so policies within different countries. So first we have some European countries, we have North America also. Some are more regional, they're not exclusive from one country, some from the US. Because we're a diverse group, we are from different regions. We also have Latin America represented and different country policies, many of these in their own national languages. And then we also have Asia with the Korean Institute and Japan and several other. And there are some internationals also as well. So there are resources there are things to look at in terms of policy. So first thing, be aware of them. Second thing, if you want to add anything, you have any other policy you can think of and would contribute, there's the collaborative notes again. So please do include them. So the other one is be aware of available OS training resources. So in many institutions, there are courses or training being provided for people, but also there are things like the UNESCO Capacity Building Index that has many resources on training that you can access, and there are other examples as well. One other thing, I think this is repeated in other groups, is maximize your visibility and citations out of your open science work. So for that, very important to be present digitally. And for this, we have a very nice work that has been done from Parsec, which is a checklist on how to be visible. So using all these identifiers, right, all the hits. Another thing is that your data and your software and your code be citable. And there was a session yesterday about this and how things are going within the publications, how much people are including this in a way that is increasing availability of data. So there's also a work by, this is in AGU, also checklist on how to do this and how to do it better. There's also important the credit taxonomy, how to best acknowledge how people contribute to the different works.
Sorry, is there a link to these slides somewhere?
No, but we could maybe put it in the collab notes. We can put them for the links. You mean?
Yeah, for the links.
Yes. So the links are in the tools.
They are in the meeting.
Yeah. So here,
You have
I think you would find them, right? Their examples are, the links are in this table for real.
Yes.
Yeah, and those links are in the notes.
In the meeting notes.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Right above the questions.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, credit taxonomy, that's very good for how to acknowledge contributions. And there's also the Turing way of, there's an example about this on how to best acknowledge contributions. Yeah, so not only use them, but also cite them. Important to cite and use all these identifiers. So this is a way of maximizing the visibility. Then there's also financial rewards or supports that are specifically for open science. For instance, prizes or specific funds that are open for this. Or for instance, in Uruguay now there's a pilot case that we're going to start using, that is, if you have your data management plan and you are depositing data, you have 10% extra for your fund. So these are kind of incentives that are important, but you need to be aware. So good that we reach out to this. And then there are symbolic rewards. And for that, there's another example. So this is not only, prizes or funds or things that have to do with financial things, but so here, yeah, you can also access. I see a lot of animals, so they're all everyone's there. So we do have many examples here. Very, very interesting things are happening already. And we want to have more. So because when there are examples on how to reward and people are doing this, it's very important for us to share. For example, some badges, the TOPS, NASA work. What else?
The AGU prizes.
The AGU prizes, yes. Recognition prize. There we go. So yeah, many different examples. I don't want to extend too long, so probably
okay.
Are we okay? So we are very interested in hearing what you have, what you know. So first, I think one important thing is that, as Lawrence was saying, we have different levels. So I don't know, the first thing question in the club notes, where do you come from? What's your position? Because we're here, the first target is researchers, but we also want to target funders, institutions, policymakers from the government. So we're interested in knowing, like, you who are contributing to this, where are you coming? Where's your area or main job title? Also, do you know of any RDA groups that are working in rewarding schemes? I think I've heard incentives in every talk I went in the last 2 days. So I think we are connected, but it would be good that you point to this. So this is also, there's a space in the club notes specifically for, so each section, A, B, C, D, for each level, you will find there some blocks. Yeah, the questions are in red, and then there's the tables. So, but now is the space is open for opinions, comments on, is there anything we're missing here on what you would recommend for researchers in terms of rewards and incentives? And are there any other resources that we're missing?
I can go back to the previous slide.
This. So the idea of this is to expand on each point, but these are the main ideas for researchers.
Yes. Can I have an opinion?
Yes.
So I'm Anka Hienola from Finnish Meteorological Institute, and up to maybe 5 years ago, I used to be a climate scientist doing science, meaning then I turned to the dark side of things of open science. I'm working a lot with my researchers at my institute, and I have to tell you that they don't care about the policies at the national level, not even the ones at the institutional level. So we have several of them. They've never read them because they don't care. They don't care about the badges. And they have to do their own research, so they do not have time to go for the open science prizes or specific funds. So we have tools at at our institute at FMI, which help them with the maximizing the visibility. They don't care even about that. They know that they just have to use them because it's a must, because they are forced basically by the either funders or the journal. So at the moment, this is the attitude, I'm afraid.
Yes, well,
I suppose that you are aware of that, but maybe somebody should say it loud.
I think, yeah, this is where many, everything started, right? From there's no one wants to do this, it's extra work, it's extra burden. So as I said, in Uruguay, the case is the first case of a pilot thing being done in order to introduce a reward for some researchers. That would be probably not many. We don't know how many are going to actually align with that, but there's a reward there. There's a percentage increased budget. And so I don't think all of this will cover every researcher. There's someone's will look for rewards symbolic, someone would.
I think all this cover about 3 researchers in the whole Europe. I don't know, but they really don't care about these things.
we are much aware about that. The idea is, this is in a way for people who want to get reward for their open science activities. So that would be at the moment more adapted to people that already do some open science activities, but do not get any credit for this right now. We are very much aware that people who doesn't want to do that, they should be incentivized in many ways. And we believe that the best way to do that is to put the open science activities in general, let's say, the research evaluation scheme, so that makes probably things easier.
Yes.
And we have other recommendations as well for that, but they're not dedicated to the researchers, but more to the funders or to the institutions. That's we'll come to that after this one.
Yeah.
So but we do agree that
Yeah, I have to tell you, all the researchers at my institute are doing open science because they have to. That's the stick, is not the carrot.
and it's and they are
And
researching about climate,
Yes.
which is
But
Yeah,
then they
that's-
do open science automatically because so much climate science is open science.
it is more organized.
There's 2 questions in the back. I think anyway, it's do you have an improvement to this then to propose? Maybe that would be good to have it in the
I think about
by the note in the notes. Yeah, no. So first, yes, and then over there.
Hi, James Wilson, UCL. So I'm not sure if it's something to add to this, but we do now have institutional policy on career progression, which does specifically mention the importance of open science. And I totally understand Anka's position about a degree of cynicism within the research community, but it is quite useful to be able to point people at this and just point out that it is officially university institutionally sanctioned, that this should play a part in people's promotions. It's a step on the way, it's a chip on the block, and I think maybe if we could share some of these policies or the passages that do promote this to encourage such uptake and such inclusion by other universities, it might be a step in the right direction. I'm currently in the process of updating our policies. Should be anyway, I'm a bit behind on it. But,
Just to quickly say, there's like initiative called Helios in the US where they're trying to share the policies
Okay.
with other organizations. Yeah.
So we have one question here and then over here.
Hi, Amy Nurnberger, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I'm wondering for the guidance for researchers, I think we've heard from a couple about this is hard, this is difficult, our researchers don't want to add this on. So a guidance for researchers might be thinking about a better understanding of how much, open science costs them so that they can ask for that in their funding. It's not sure, we'll get to the funder recommendations for funders and institutions, but researchers know how much it's going to cost to do this so that they can ask for it, so they can get it done, so they can get the recognition and credit for it.
Absolutely, and we have something in funders that is a bit like be aware how much this will cost you,
And that's great for the
and you can put it
funding
in the
side.
funding.
We can put it both places, that'd be great.
So over
Yeah.
here.
So Warren Parsons, I work with NASA in their Chief Science Data Office. And so maybe this isn't also in the funder section, but following up on what Amy was saying, NASA is recognizing this. NASA has a new information policy, very progressive, very open, but they're putting their money where their mouth is. So there will be more solicitations coming out over the next several years, but there's currently a solicitation that's open to propose to get money to open your resources, to open your software, to open your data formats, things like that. So I think we are maybe trending in the right direction, but it's a real carrot, it's money.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know your name, but yes, you.
Me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Lieke de Boer, I'm from the Netherlands East Science Center, and I can just agree with you that I think it's very important to make the incentives rewarding for the researchers in whatever way is a real reward to them in that moment. So that can be money, but it can also be recognition if it's being recognized as something worth doing.
I think the funding agencies are ahead of the institutions in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
In terms of recognition of openness.
Yes.
You're getting ahead. That's the funder section.
Sorry.
We'll get there. Yes, sorry.
We can actually enable open science practices by making it easier, So we had, I'm from TU Delft, and my name is Marke Tepperk, and we have a couple of years ago launched, I think, one of the first policies on open source software for the university. What I think was quite important, first of all, the whole policy creation was led by a researcher who was actually very keen on open science practices and policies, not because he was forced to, because he really wanted to change things how they are. But what the policy intervention meant is that probably you are aware software by itself is copyrighted. So if you are working for a research institution, your institution mostly will own the copyright on software. That means in practice, if you want to commercialize your software, if you want to make it publicly available, doesn't matter, you should in theory check with your whatever commercialization offices whether they allow you to commercialize your or not or publish your software. That of course has been ridiculous, especially for people who want to publish their software openly. Like I don't want to be checking with my patent office if I can make this commit to GitHub, for example. So researchers really led the initiative, supported by the library, by IT departments, to allow those who want to publish their software under open source licenses to do that, bypassing all the legal valorization people, you can do it automatically. So now TU Delft's policy is that, I'm really proud of that actually, that if a researcher wants to publish their software open source, TU Delft gives them the copyright to do so. So that's actually an enabling policy, that's a nudge to do open science because your life is easier. So there can be really good examples, and I'm really proud to say that was researcher-led, so those researchers exist.
I like that, and please include it in the notes because it's a good example.
No, there's definitely more.
Yeah, one more question and we go for the next.
Well, you can have a few ones more.
Yeah, okay. Yes, please.
Yes, thanks for your presentation. So I'm working at the University of Lille in France, and I'm also sitting on the French Secretariat for Open Science at the national level. So I think two items are missing in your proposal. One is the awareness of the legal framework in which the researchers are working. we all know that they are not aware of what they can do and what they can't do. So I think it's something that you probably should have, because it's something a bit different than policies. We can have policies, but we also have a legal framework. And I think, so that's the first point. And the second point is, we know that researchers need information not just in case, they need information just in time. So it means that you probably should have one item, which is the idea of a one-stop shop, a single point of contact at the university level, where the researcher can easily get in touch with and then have the different contacts with the specialists they need. Because it's good to know the general strategy, but it's better to have a point of contact where they need it. And guess what? When they have a project and where they are working on it, they can send, we all know that because we all face that, they can send an email at 10 p.m. on Saturday saying, I have something I need for Monday. That's where we have to show that we are serious and we can help. So I would probably add also that item.
I think on that point, on the last one, the first one, I think it's great. Yeah, we consider policies, but I agree the legal aspects and even like licensing, it's an issue that is difficult, and yeah, that's a very good point. The second point, I think we do mention this in the institution levels, but we'll get to that in terms of dedicating special people to be giving resources for people to point of contact, be someone actively helping researchers. So I will now institutions now. I think it's the time of noise.
Hello, my name is Thompson. I'm from the University of Toulouse, and I'm an emeritus researcher at INSERM. So now we just began with the point of view of researchers, but otherwise now we have the institutions, and afterwards we have publishers and we have funders. So I think at the end we'll have a general discussion which can take all the things into account. But then now, what can the institutions do in order to favor open science? First point is that mandate deposit of all research outputs in the institutional or other compliant repository to be publicly available under an open license. Mandate for DMP, data management program, software management plan for all research projects, required to manage research data in line with FAIR principles, ensure that all publications contain data availability statements, boost appreciation of the researchers with good open science practices, with well-documented, fair and open digital outputs in the annual reviews by including OS, open science activities, such as those described in the introduction. So, I mean, this is a very important point, that in the evaluation of researchers, you should take into account open science activities, and not just publications in journals with high impact. So, how to provide open science capacity building support? Provide open science courses for research staff and postgraduate students. Sorry. Okay. We turn it a bit.
Oh no!
What is that? Oh, that is one.
Intermission.
So we hope. Okay.
Don't touch it.
So we go on. So the institution, they should provide open science capacity building support. I have to say that institutions that can be local level, university, it can also be at the national level, as in France, for instance, CNRS or INSERM. we have to organize institutional working groups and workshops in order to support open science and provide digital training materials and newsletters. And you will see there are some examples that you can consult if you like. So we go on. The institution should provide infrastructure and material resources for open science, provide or work with a trusted repository, provide digital services and tools, for instance, the data management program tool, fair data management, anonymization, and analysis tools. And finally, provide financial support for open science. So the costs related to identifiers, registration for all research outputs, including datasets, costs associated with research data, software management, and investments in national, regional open science initiatives, such as Diamond open access initiative, because open access to publications is very important. And there was another point that was coming up, that was in fact that maybe researchers cannot do all this. I mean, they have learned to do research, but all this new stuff about open science, maybe you need special people in order to facilitate this. And it was also mentioned by Flo. So now how to create other types of rewards. Okay, can you have gifts? Can you have salary bonus? Can you have chances to, or possibilities to work with other groups? And free time, sabbatical time. So we would like to ask you for some ideas that we can put into this. The floor is open.
Next slide.
Yes.
I'm a data steward of a non-university research institute in Germany, and I'm a bit surprised to not find the advocation for or the recommendation to have data stewards at every institute. Like, make the money to pay a person that is there to help people. Also, I was surprised to find providing courses only on research and postgraduate level. What about the students and the PhD candidates? They should know and learn too. We need to build the younger generation, so when they become PIs, they already know stuff.
At least
Yeah. So when we were students, it was not a question, it's a long time ago, but now I think you have to begin at the lower level in order, everybody should now think of the necessity to make open science. But just now, you may be a bit pessimistic. We have heard that it is very difficult to put that into action. So, yeah.
Sven Rank, Forschungszentrum Jülich, Germany. I think that many institutions will also simply need systems that monitor and track the open science activities of their staff. Because if they don't have these systems, they cannot reward the staff for the open science activities. For example, in my institution, we can track open access publications completely. We can track some of the open data publications, but that's incomplete. And we have no system to track open source code activities. So we will need a more comprehensive system before we can start rewarding people. Thanks.
Similar to the dashboard at the Charité?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's a really good system. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that also in US you have a Harvard University, which has in fact now they have rules that were proposed by the US government, and if it works out, I don't know, but okay. There wasn't a question behind that. Yeah.
At the last part of rewards, I think these all expect researchers to have tenure and a stable place at university. I think for most researchers, getting a prolonged contract or getting funding or getting to continue to work for another half a year, even if you do open science. So having that count when institutions employ would make it worth doing. Because I think now it's difficult to advise a young researcher if they should choose an open, diamond, beautiful journal that is, I mean, from my point of view, perfect, but not maybe the prestigious journal that I know that the old professors in their department love to publish in, because that's a good journal.
Yeah. All right. Question there and afterwards, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just a comment. I think also for the third category, I think types of rewards that work really well are things that look good on researchers' CVs, like fellowship, being a champion of something, getting a prize, something that helps their CV and career that they can show off with.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of those two latter points, but I think it has to come with a downside too, because this is not just a question of open science, this is a question of good practice and bad practice, and bad practice should have knock-on effects, personally. I mean, I'm not talking about going down the lines of blacklisting people or, I don't know, bashing them on the head with a copy of Science in Action, but you know, I think there should be some sort of league table or ranking table of people who are actively engaged in this and people who are not engaged in this that could impact employability or access to grants.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about for institutions, open science is not just about data management, software management, it's not just about publishing. And it's actually, there are many other research, university services are involved, legal, grant offices, commercialization, valorization center. So for institutions, I feel it's very important for them to have an ecosystem that or approach to facilitate, enable all different services, not just researchers, not just data steward or other direct support staff involved in open science, but also those hidden stakeholders that are not very visible in the landscape of open science practices yet, to also make them more aware of their tasks, their responsibilities in this common goal, and also provide kind of approach and vehicles to allow them to also recognize their work, enable them to do better work, and reward them in certain way. So I feel that it's more the other stakeholders with institutions, in addition to the visible, obvious stakeholders, they should be better identified and suggested.
Okay, but now we're concentrating upon institutions, and afterwards we'll go on with other stakeholders. Yes.
So I think part of this gets to how institutions are understanding and evaluating research, both to the comments about early career researchers and how that research is valued, as well as, you know, should there be a policy looking at how open research and scholarship might be viewed in promotion and tenure packages, right? And I think a caveat to this is to keep in mind that not all disciplines can engage in open science, right? There's reproducible research as a different flavor to this, because not all disciplines can be open in those ways. So having that understanding, looking at a more comprehensive way of evaluating research that takes into account not just the article, but also the other research materials that are associated with that article or with that scholarship, rather than just focusing on the open science aspect. And of course, there's a BOF related to this, so go check that out.
Yeah, maybe 3 suggestions. One is about monitoring and measuring. So it's good to have policies, but it's good to know where we are and where we want to go. And if we want to do that, we need something like a barometer at one point. So to know what is the direction, to know at what pace we are going to that direction, and so on. The interesting initiative we have in France is that we have a national barometer of open science, so we can aggregate the issues that we have at the national level, but we also have declination at the local level. So I would suggest that for institutions, implementing just a barometer is a good thing. The second comment I would like to make is, of course, we talk about young researchers, they are the decision makers of tomorrow, but they are not the decision makers of today. And the decision makers of today, who are they? They are the rectors, the vice rectors, the member of scientific council, and so on. So we probably need at an institutional level to make a specific effort towards that community, to make sure that those decision makers are fully aware of everything. And the third comment I would like to add, it's very good to see that you are proposing to invest in national and regional open science initiatives. I would say that we should also at the institutional level invest into international initiatives. The good example is the initiatives supported by SCOS. You probably all know SCOS and how is it working. So SCOS is managing to gather some money at an international level to support Data Alliance, to support DOAJ, to support DOAB, and so on. So these international initiatives are very weak. I mean, they need some money at one point, and if the money is not there, it will stop. And they are just like underpinnings of open science. So I would also suggest to support that at a European and international level, to support that at a national level, that's what we do in France, but also to support that at the university level themselves.
Okay, I think that in France, there's a very strong movement for open science by CNRS and in several other countries also, but the international level is very important. So, but we'll come back to that also with the question of funders. More questions?
Last question.
Yeah, so just reflecting on the idea of mandates and forcing certain behaviours. So talking from an institutional perspective, we do have mandates and we do have policies which are quite strict about following principles of open science. But actually, when you work within an institution and you work with researchers, you have to be very careful about the language you use, and you don't want to antagonize the researchers who you work with, particularly if they have fears about certain aspects of open science, which many of them do have. Simply wading in and sort of bashing them on the head with the data truncheon is not necessarily the best way to win people over and to get them to adapt and adopt their practices. So I think there's been a little bit of nuance around the issues of mandating. I think some things you can mandate, other things you have to pace it a little bit. You have to kind of do a little bit of work on that cultural change and acceptance before you can start mandating things without just antagonizing the people you want to bring with you.
That's right, it is a cultural change.
Just to build on your point there about mandates, my name's Aoife, I'm from the University College Cork in Ireland. Something we found is that sometimes the mandates come before there is even infrastructure to support the action. And that's really difficult because you're like, you have to do this, but we've no way for you to actually do this. And that's so frustrating for researchers. And when you're trying to support them, it's, you're banging your head off a brick wall, really, like in that context. So I think that idea of mandates and thinking very carefully and using them very strategically, but making sure the infrastructure and the support is there to implement them when they do come.
That's actually what they did in Liège University. The rector at the Liège University at the end of the year 2000 was willing, altogether with the director of the library, to impose this mandate. And so they prepared that and they built at a very strong pace the repository engine. And they say, now we impose the mandate because the repository is there. So you're right, we need to have the infrastructure and to be able to impose the mandate.
Yeah. Okay, now we will move to the question of funders and yes.
Okay. So the funders have been mentioned quite a bit. So I did want to actually start off with an example. So I'm at the Michael J. Fox Foundation, but also at the Aligning Science around Parkinson's, and we actually integrate sharing at all levels. So we require protocols to be shared, data, software. We require the tools, reagents, other things like that. They're required to do this, but also it's a collaborative environment. So you're asked to share within the process itself, and you get feedback, you get assistance, and so it is like one of those model policies out there forward thinking, and it doesn't just like say, mandate, require. We actually have resources. We have a open science team, and we actually work with the researchers to make all this available. But I just wanted to go down the list of our recommendations. So adopt formal policies requiring strongly encouraging OS activities. And I use that ASAP open science policy, which you can go and see, but it really requires all the things that we're asking for, and we're actually at the point now where we're trying to assess and improve how people do that, sharing. So we're advancing even further, like down into data standards and other things that they should do. The other thing, and I'm a little bit hesitant about this, adopt relevant frameworks and initiatives related to responsible research assessment. I'm not sure if funders really, look at this, but we look at it in the sense that, at least in my perspective, we don't want to fund researchers that are not sharing openly nowadays. Like, we want to look at how, at least in our perspective, and some of the forward-looking thinking funders, is that we want to see that we're funding researchers that are sharing their data, sharing their software. And there was a point about infrastructure, right? And that's what we're trying to also improve as funders. So we're trying to work with the infrastructure to understand, to really, be able to sort of understand that sharing as well. So monitor OS's compliance and support findability of outputs. There was a mention about supporting community infrastructure. So, at least from our perspective, we want to utilize something like DataCite Commons that everyone else can use for data citations. And so one of the great examples at the moment is the DataCite Corpus project, which I know it was mentioned that there are standards for citing and writing availability statements, but authors are not doing it that way. We're still working to that point. Publishers are trying to catch up with that. They're the best practices and the guidance are trying to catch up. So at the moment, they're really just sharing what they can, like links, and it's very unorderly. And so I think like the combination of what you heard before about the availability statement guidance and the citations, but also knowing that this is still a messy space, and that projects like the DataCite Corpus project are really important too. Recognizing outputs, so the contributions. So it was mentioned before about the Turing-Way's record of contributions. I really think this is amazing because it's like a contract when you start a project. Here are the roles involved. Here are, here's what, here are the people that are working on the project, as a way to sort of document, because of credit and how people sort of miss contributions in the scholarly process. And I also wanted to realize that there's this new project identifier called RAID, the Research Activity Identifier, which I think will allow us to link all these activities together and really make sense of the chaos, to be honest. So create calls for financing OS-driven activities. I really like the CZI EOSS. This is supporting open source software. But I think there are other cases. So I think we listed it on another slide, this DataWorks project, which actually gave awards to data. But that's something I think funders should also consider. Weaving open science activities into the budget. So we actually, at least in the Michael J. Fox Foundation OA policy, we actually have a common fund for supporting APCs, but we really want to move forward, beyond that, and actually support things like the author manuscript or preprints, the green path, like forward. But like weaving in some of this support to support the open science activities is I think that's a ASAP example that I mentioned to you earlier. And then enough funding to be dedicated to appropriate resources for staff and open science infrastructure. So we've heard that. And one of the things that we're sort of exploring, and this is what ASAP does, but Michael J. Fox as well, is actually supporting the community too. So champions and so that the community you can have open science champions support each other in this sort of network within the funded activity, so that you can actually have these resources, people to turn to help you in this process. And then, integrate equity and inclusiveness into programs and activity. And I mentioned TOPS. I think that's, one of their, core goals is to really, ensure that these projects and the research are equitable. And that's definitely something we look at too in our funding. So I guess the questions here are anything else you would recommend for the funders? And, are there sort of any funder related resources you would recommend? Yeah, Amy, I mean, it's like you're about to ask a question.
I was about to make a suggestion and then I pulled back, but then you said Amy. So I think funders should join the RDA Funder Forum. They should join the Open Research Funders Group. They should be part of those conversations actively.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Those are forums. I think one of the things I will just add to you is that what I'm hearing increasingly from funder friends right now is that, it's very hard for us to understand this space. There's so many open science projects, and we're really starting to get serious about what do we prioritize as far as community infrastructure. How do we support, infrastructure to drive adoption of preprints, to drive, adoption of data citation and those kind of things. And I think that's what, we really need, like, community to help us with that, like mapping that space out. Because, if you're at a funder and you're head down and you're funding these projects and doing certain things, you're not exactly paying attention to the open science environment. It's really chaotic, to be honest. There's a lot of stuff going on. But the good news is they're hiring, I am an open science, I'm the open science person at Michael J. Fox Foundation. ASAP has an open science team, so some of the funders are really bringing in open science people. But one of the things we don't understand is we send out a ton of information. So like trying to get a cohesive message back to publishers is really important too. Yeah.
I think it's in the same vein like yours. But I would recommend to funders to make sure that their people that are evaluating grant proposals know what they should be looking for. So having courses on open science for all of those people that are not necessarily paid by funders. So it depends on the organization of how it is decided, which grant is getting money and which is not. But I think some are doing it for free and aside on their research, and maybe they're also not trained.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, in the back there. I think that in the gray sweater, or blue. I don't know. That's you. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe in the same direction a little bit. I mean, of course, we're talking about research funders, but maybe the open science support measures by the funders could also include the research support staff in the research institutions. Because, for example, in the last weeks and months, I talked to several German university departments and also research institution departments. And for example, the staff departments in there, they don't understand, the people there often don't understand open science activities. So, and they are also very important when it comes to who's promoted in the institution, who's getting personal development measures. And I think maybe raise open science awareness also among that group of people who are not researchers, but research support people would also be a good idea, because, yeah, stuff like Coara, for example, often isn't understood in the personal development departments in the research institutions. And so there are some people maybe who could profit from awareness measures.
Yeah, you're making me. This is something that has come up. So we have a forum of 1,000 researchers, that joins these researcher calls, and one of the things that's come up often with them about open science and stuff they're confused about who they go to on campus. There's no map, there's no, I am still a librarian, and I often say the library is a good place, for that kind of discussion, but it's really a team, right? We've heard about this in other conversations. I was in a session earlier about how really the campus needs to think about how it's a team and how particular parts of the campus work together. But yeah, that's come up, and that's interesting. How can I, as a funder, work with those kind of cases? There's so many universities, right? But that's a interesting thing you brought up, and it's been coming up. Yeah. There's someone in the back. Oh no, I think you had your hand up before, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay, well, thank you. I am Javier Albacete from the European Commission. Okay, this is a difficult topic. To simplify it, for me, the key aspect for the uptake of open science practices are the rewards and incentives. That is linked to the research assessment, how research is evaluated. In your previous slide, you were suggesting to adopt the evaluation, how is it called, relevant frameworks and initiative to responsible research assessment. My suggestion would be to reformulate that point and to participate in creating, in forging, and in defining the new frameworks and initiatives. In that sense, I wanted to make a bit of a clarification. We in the Commission, we have been largely involved in facilitating the setup of the COARA. The COARA was launched a few months ago based on an agreement that has been signed up by 500 organizations by now. And well, the real operations and work of the COARA will start soon. So it has been formally created. There is a lot of momentum, there is a lot of engagement, but the real work, which is precisely to define which would be these relevant frameworks for a more responsible research assessment, has not started yet. There will be a call for working groups soon, and hopefully the work will start soon. The main idea there is to get all the relevant stakeholders, including also funders. I think there are of the order of 50 or 60 funders that have signed up to the COARA, many of the most relevant funders in Europe for the moment, to actually, well, share practices, pilot, experiment, but do it together, because there is a lot of waste of the resources when individual organizations go about this individually. There is a lot to lose, so this is a call for collective action. And what I wanted to clarify is a couple of things. First is that even if the COARA is perceived as an European initiative, and to some extent it is, because the dialogue and the action started locally in Europe, the scope is global, so it's open to organizations from all over the world which are involved in research assessment. So this would be an invitation to our non-European colleagues here in the room to consider actually joining, because it's open. And there are already many funders that are rolling their sleeves up and getting ready to do some work and define these frameworks. So all the non-European organizations are also invited to participate there. Also, a bit of a clarification, the main idea behind the COARA includes open science, but it's not only about it. The main idea is to put quality of research back in the focus of research assessment practices. And this comes from the diagnosis that currently we are looking at things, typically papers with high journal impact factors, that are not necessarily correlated with good research at all. So the idea is to put the spotlight back on everything that contributes to high quality research. And part of that is, of course, open science, because it's good practice, because it enables collaboration. But there are many other things that the researchers do beyond open science that contribute to quality. So the framework is a bit broader than just open science. It's mostly about quality and responsible research assessment. So yeah, I have to do that piece of advertisement. Please, global colleagues. That's why
No, I'm really happy you
that's why
did.
they pay my trip too.
No, I'm really happy because like
But I think
Amy.
the really important clarification is to make clear that the Quora is not an EU-only organization. It's truly global in the scope. We started it there because you have to start somewhere, and we were very much engaged. But it would be a lot more transformative if actually, because we don't want to create silos. Let's say that more or less within Europe you get to redefine a little bit the assessment framework. But if our US, Australian colleagues from all over the world do not align to some extent to avoid contradictions, this is going to give undesirable results.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought this up. So I've been tracking, or I don't know if some of our other funders are, but Amy mentioned one of the groups where we have a number of funders, like Open Research Funders Group, and it would be great. I agree that the participation would be great. So thanks for mentioning that. But I don't know if we have time for another question.
Yeah, for the last question, I think, if you want to.
Yeah.
Can I make a very final bit?
Yeah, quick.
The work is about to start in the coming months, so you are all still in time to actually get interested, join and start the participation. You are not late for it.
Okay.
Yeah, got it.
But are we gonna go to, okay.
Time for last question? We have more time at the end. We won't reach. Lost the publishers? Are we?
No, there.
There, okay. So the publishers, they are part of the game. So we're talking about rewarding mechanisms. So what could we recommend them so far? There are some things that already exist. So the first thing is to require that authors to require that authors include systematically the ORCIDs in all research outputs. This is really the way to connect outputs to the people so that they can get credit back from it. So I think it is quite common now from publishers from journals to ask for the ORCID. It is not systematic at the moment. Also, we could suggest them to adopt a credit taxonomy, and this for sure is not the common rule. There are a number of journals asking for this, but enabling this, but not a lot. And this is quite interesting at the moment because this is one way to specify, for instance, that I think there are 14 categories, and one of them is data curation. So at least at this level, you can specify that you've done something related to data curation. So it's a way to make visible your open science activity, but still the journal needs to do that. I mean, to adopt this taxonomy. Otherwise, you cannot do anything. Same thing with the Open Science Badges initiatives. It's a kind of a symbolic reward that you can get, but there are three, I think, at the moment. Open data, three badges, pre-registered, open materials and pre-registered. So there's this kind of three activities that you can highlight with this badge system. Once again, the journal needs to adopt it first, otherwise you cannot embark. Another recommendation would be to find ways to recognize peer reviews related work. I think we all agree with that, with how to do that. This is a bit complex. Another point actually, which Florence could tell more about that, is to encourage open access publishing in all low and medium income countries by revising the criteria for publishing fees and adjust it using meaningful indicators. And I'm saying this, for instance, because in Uruguay, for example, Uruguay is considered as a high-income country, considering the GDP, but as a matter of fact, it has very little investment in research. So when you ask researchers from Uruguay to pay a few thousand publication, an open access publication, they would never be able to do that. So probably there are other indicators that are more meaningful and that should be used. And there is one, for instance, that we thought about, which is a GERD, the gross domestic expenditure related to R&D, which probably be more meaningful. So again, this is something that should be improved in some way. So this is what we've thought about. So again, we'd like to have your ideas or your disagreements or whatever. Same questions. Same question. Yep.
So it relates to the badges. The Center of Open Sciences has a broader initiative called the Transparency and Openness Promotion, something like that, TOP. And there's something called the TOP Factor. And it's a way for journals to assess their transparency and openness and then advertise their transparency and openness. And so there's various categories like that relates to the badges, you know, open data, open methods, open materials, but it's more than that. And journals can choose where they want to be on a spectrum on each of these, and then you can sort of declare here, you know, I am at the most advanced openness and so forth. So it's a methodology to sort of assess your openness. And then I guess just related to that, again, related to that is just simply require data citation and require software citation.
Yeah, I will agree with that. I think we have the tops.
Yeah, I would like to comment also on peer reviewing and go a little bit further. We know that quality is very much connected to openness and transparency. So I would also be in favor of putting a little bit forward this issue and making open peer reviewing a goal also for publishers, you know, because we know that at one point, peer reviewing at one point, not in every discipline, but somewhere it's a black box, you know. And when it's open peer reviewing, when it's sharing our publication, our review of the publication with the world, then it means that in some point, the quality of the reviewing and so on, the comments made will be maybe of higher quality, and it will be very good for the research itself. So I will probably put that also as a recommendation for the publisher. It's for us. We have initiatives, for instance, like peer community, starting in France, but now it's international. But the publishers themselves could probably benefit from open peer reviewing also.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, sure.
So I like open peer review, and I've participated in open peer reviews for F1000 and stuff, and like I say, I like it. I'm an editor of a journal, and we talked about it, and my editorial board actually pushed back. There can be issues with that. For example, a junior researcher doing an open review of a senior researcher who's good friends with their mentor, there can be there. So I think it's worth consideration, but it's not always suitable, and double blind in some cases might be more appropriate.
But if I can comment on it, when you say open peer reviewing, it could be, imagine to have a transparent review, but with no name.
Right, it could be open and double blind. Yeah, that's a good point.
That was my point. You know, it's not. I know the issue. You know, if you are a PhD or young researchers and you say something bad about a very high-level colleague, you know that your career can be at risk.
Right.
Okay, there. But if it's opening, let's say, the content, we know that some peer reviewing are not at the level we expect them to be, because people can be lazy and so on. If it's open, you know, if people can read it and then you can comment openly, then it's very good. I like the way the mathematicians do things. You know, they put things on archive. It's a 3 years or 4 years discussion, so everything is open and all the comments are open. So then it can improve the paper itself.
So, okay, I like that. What F1000 does is it's not anonymous. But the point of that is that you are supposed to be getting credit. You know, you get a DOI for your review, and you can actually put your review in your CV and so forth. So there's different ways of doing this, I guess, is the way.
Thanks. So I'm working at F1000. So I'm head of data and software publishing. My name is Rebecca Grant. So I suppose from my perspective, at F1000, we do a lot of this. We require ORCID, we use credit. We don't have open science badges because everyone would get one, so it felt kind of pointless. We have the peer review, as already mentioned. We have open commenting, so readers can add comments if they want. We do have APC waivers for LMICs, but that's not really my area of expertise, so I won't comment on that. We also require data citation and software citation. And I suppose having reached this baseline of what we're already talking about, I still really struggle with how to communicate the benefits of data sharing for our authors, trying to communicate in what way this is recognized. Like, we talk a bit about increased citation when data is shared, but even having reached this level of, but we're actually doing all of this, it's still very difficult to message the benefits. So I suppose this might be a starting point. I don't know what the next stage is because it's what we're struggling with. But just to say, from the perspective of a publisher who's done a lot of this already, I don't know if it's helped.
Than you, but my comment would be that I agree with you. I mean, this is to make things progress, but in my view, it won't be a lot of progress till it's not in the evaluation scheme. So we're always going around the problem, the main topic, but still we can still do things, some things to help, but that for sure won't be enough. You want to say something?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in our group, but wasn't on the slides, but that instead of badges, make this actionable. You know, like go to the publisher's page and, you know, you're filtering out the ones that already have data or software, you know, like in the search and discovery systems, have that filter, you know, filter too. Because that's happened in astronomy, you know, where there's associated data or not, and you sort of filter out these things
that's what the top factor tries to do. And
yeah.
so if you participate in that, they'll present, you know, where the journals are on the spectrum.
Yeah, and then maybe the other side of this too is that it's not so paper-based anymore, that it's because we have RAID, we have project IDs now, and that there's more to research, you know, like, and the filtering, being able to filter, you know, the research in various ways will be, I think, you know, how we maybe incentivize.
Would it make sense to include data more in the review and have users also review the data, not just the article? Because I also, from the repository, I also had this discussion sometimes with researchers about, yes, the data is there, we do the curation, but the curation is not reviewing data, it's not the same as a peer review of the data, which I think could be managed if the publishers talk with reviewers, if that would be a relevant thing to do, either as part of the normal review or data reviewers that specialize in that. Would that make sense?
So we do that already, so we do require peer reviewers to review the data, but it's quite common, I think, to most publishers.
It's really hard.
It's hard to enforce, I would say.
Just like to follow up on that, it's also maybe a good idea for publishers to collaborate with other partners like data repositories who actually host data sets during the review process, and using badges like to also recognize the work from the repository and so also from the publishers putting effort for all these things. So it's kind of, it's not to, in addition to all these things that publishers would do to recognize research work contributions, but also to recognize the work from publishers and repositories or other partners in doing all the open science practices.
Okay, so a last comment from Anne.
Yes,
and then you
come.
So, you can come.
I can do both at the same time. What I wanted to say about what has been said until now is just that we have to structure things to present something today, but it's the convergence of all these different levels that will enhance each other, I would say, that would in the end, hopefully, come with more open science recognition. So you should not be blocked, I would say, by the fact that we have funders, publishers, researchers, and so on, but the whole thing probably will have to intertwine, and in the end, it's the convergence of all these things that will help in the domain. So I'm in charge of talking to you about what we worked on regarding government policymakers. So first of all, we thought that it was, well, who are we to give advice and recommendations to national or international policymakers? But anyway, we had some thoughts about, and here they are. And I have just mentioned, well, my country, having a national open science plan. I'm Anne Campbell-Thompson from CNRS, working in a health research unit in Toulouse, University of Toulouse. And having been involved in health aspects and open science aspects for a number of years. So the first thing we thought of was, when it exists, and it's not in all countries that there is national initiatives, national plans, national programs, what does it do? In addition to what publishers, researchers, institutions, and so on, funders can do. So that's what is listed, and it's not, well, there are other things that can be added. It can harmonize practices, because when you have institutions, even within one country, having a very advanced policy on open science, and another one, well, researchers can move from one to the other one, with a very different level of policy advancement. At the national level, you can really try to harmonize practices. Of course, having a national plan, it shows political willingness, importance. And that can be something institutions, researchers, funders can refer to, and that's important. It applies to many things, many different institutions within a country. You talked about academic related, non-academic related. A national policy is general. And it helps getting visibility at international level. From the international level, you can see what's going on in France, what's going on in Germany, from the national plans that may exist. Of course, I put it in the middle of the thing, but that's the first thing you thought of. It provides a budget for these activities, which has been underlined by everybody for all kinds of stakeholders. And it also provides opportunities to set up a national observatory of practices. What is going on across different stakeholders? And it also allows to monitor, and that has been mentioned by in the discussion before, to monitor implementation across disciplines and institutions of open science practices. So that's where the thought we had regarding the what a national plan or policy can do. Then we came out with a number of recommendations aligned with this idea. Includes rewarding mechanism as key elements of open science policies, because you may have all the recommendations you want and mandate to do this, do that. If it is not related to some rewarding mechanisms, and if this is not underlined, well, you don't reach the aim. Insisting on the positive aspects, and somebody talked about the researchers wanted their research, well, to contribute to common good, to all these things that open science is facilitating. And I think that national policy should have this principal aspect underlined, because it's a reference point. Create observatories of practices that showcase mechanisms in place that work or do not work, or being piloted in real life. And that might be difficult to operationalize in all places at the same time, but by having observatories that show, okay, this has been tried here compared to that has been tried here. How does that compare, work? That is possible through a national plan. Of course, I talked about budget, provide funding to compare, to value, and harmonize the mechanisms, facilitating SWOT analysis of rewarding mechanisms, because we are in the trial of all these mechanisms. They were cited for researchers. You said it's not operational, researchers do not care about, but it may be that if it comes in their evaluation scheme, they will scratch their head a little bit more on those aspects. Encourage or fund directly the funding of projects that will study deeply these mechanisms. That's important. You need research on open science activities as research projects to understand what works, what does not, what works in this context, this discipline, what does not work here and there. And a national policy and budget for that can help really avoiding being just empiric, trying things, but really from a scientific point of view, study them. Of course, facilitate networking and sharing of practices across institutions at national level. That's what a government level plan can do. And also harmonize the way these mechanisms are assessed, because it can be done in very different ways in different institutions. And somebody underlined the importance of international level, and it's at government or national level that participating in international comparison can be done. And that is also important. And then I have the links to some resources, and there are others in the tables. So that's basically what we thought of, and it's open for your comments, discussion, criticism, proposals. It's the last part of the session. So everything you have not said before, you can still say it now. Thank you for your attention. You have the word.
Yes. Just a point of clarification. You've made a recommendation for funding on the previous slide, but the one before that, you kind of assume that there's some funding in consequence to having a policy. But there's lots of policies that don't have any funding attached, to my knowledge. So have you got some knowledge? I mean, is France, France has got a policy, got some funding to operate it? Or to evaluate it? So is this the sort of idea?
In France, for example, we have a national plan since 2018. We are in the second run of a national plan, and there are priorities. A number of things have been done with a budget at ministry level that was allocated to that. And part of what I had mentioned is actually funded through this national plan. But it also fosters regional or local initiatives and try to network all these different regional initiatives in order to have a sort of, networking, a web of initiatives within France. So there are funders of research, like the National Agency for Funding in France and many other in many countries, and 50 or I don't know how many funders you said you were in Coara. But what I meant here by the funding I was talking about was the national plan funding that is at the same time fostering the organizational aspect of open science policies within the country. And at the same time, there are some specific calls through the National Agency of Research for open science research or activities.
So for the people,
it's both.
So for the people remotely, I didn't say my name, which was Alison Speck. So you're kind of talking about a program that has developed to enact the policy. But how many governments have done that?
There's a comment in the chat about Ireland that has a plan and done it, but
yeah, I mean, I can see the internal government, monitoring or organisation. I can see that, but yes, but it may stimulate. I mean, we were talking yesterday about the bird reserve funding, Ramsar, Canberra, Jambar, which are totally toothless in terms of funding, but they demarc areas of land that then you can use as leverage if you're a lobby group, and you can get funding. You can, use it as a weapon. This is a good thing to do, and I should be doing it. So you, university, whatever, or regional council, give me money. So it's possibly mixed from country to country. Some countries
That's what I said first. Some countries have a certain model, other countries don't or have another model.
But they should have funding, I think. You're right, your idea originally, yes, to make it happen. Thank you. Thanks, Anne.
Other comment? Yes.
Just to out myself, Alejandro Suarez from the National Science Foundation of the United States. So I very much resonate with the idea of what's the order of operations between top-down mandate from a government versus the budget that may go along with it. At least in the United States, there's been, I think, a lot of power that the memos from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, both in 2012 and the one just last year, on making science open, that are then used by our funding agencies to be able to request the budget numbers and the budgetary activities that specify or specifically work on open science. So we have things like the FAIR OS research coordination networks that NSF has funded. We have work on the geosciences area of NSF has just recently come out with an open science ecosystem solicitation for funding, and all of that. All of those funding opportunities are possible because they point back to the mandate, if you will, of making science free and open to the public. So it is, as you said, very different country to country, but I'm happy to chat with anyone about the US specific example of that.
Yes, maybe I can elaborate a little bit on what's happening in France, because I think the way we design the funding is a little bit clever, because we have three different areas of funding. First, we fund 100% for, let's say, national initiatives, just like, for instance, the barometer we talked about, because we think that it's a national duty to do something there. So it's 100% funded by this fund. The other aspect, and which is very interesting, is that we try to amplify actions in universities. So that's maybe the big difference with the States, when you have this funding through agencies, but the connections with universities and themselves through these fundings are not so clear that we can have. So what we do, we amplify things. So typically we have calls, and the universities are entering the call and saying, okay, I will put 50% because I have this project which is matching with the goals of the national policy, and then the national fund puts 50% for the project. The University of Lille, for instance, has lots. We had something like hundreds of thousands of euros every year thanks to that, and other universities just like the same. And the third thing is that we put at a very early stage inside the Secretariat of Open Science the funding agencies. So typically the ANR. And so what did they do? They designed all together with us and with the people in charge of open science, they designed the calls, because we know that it's very easy to propose a call, but to have a call very well designed to fit with the needs of a researcher, it's something like a challenge. So they are there sitting on the board for years now, and that's the way they designed it. And guess what? At the beginning, they were putting no money on open science, and now they are putting more and more money on open science. So these are the three components of the fund, and it's working pretty well at the moment.
I just wanted to respond to Alejandro. One sort of opposition. So I'm part of the Go Fair US group as well, and so Veros was an interesting activity because we talked about this earlier, that open science is very much a collaborative activity. Like that we are trying to build things together, building infrastructure together. And one of the things is that we have these funding mechanisms, and NASA is similar. Like it's a competitive process. Only certain groups can apply, and
there's a new solicitation minority serving institution.
Yeah, but it's so like the whole competitive nature of grants, it almost acts against the collaborative nature that we want to support. And so, you know, that's why, you know, again, in the Aligning Science, you know, the ASAP program for Parkinson's, collaboration is baked in, you know, how we work on science together. And that was just, that was hard to see, I think, with the Pharos grant, is seeing all these colleagues and friends in the space, like working on projects and not talking to each other. And because I was in a position to see all these letters going back and forth, you know, with like a number of those projects. And so like, I think that would be great if we can think about how we can collaborate, you know, more effectively on some of those grant projects, you know, like that's a core tenet of open science. So.
Okay, we are approaching the end of this session. Now, two things I would like to add. You can still react to it. One is open science activities require from nearly all actors and researchers, as well as the other, to look more ahead than their own nose. And, you know, it's trivial to say it like that, but I think it's very important. And if you remind researchers, why are you doing research? It's not to get a publication. It's not to, well, it's also to get publication. It's also to get happy of what you do, but it's to contribute to the advancement of knowledge. And funders, they fund research to contribute to the advance of knowledge, not only to be the one putting the most money on this, on that, compared to others. And you can find many examples. So I would like to finish this thing saying that open science, in its very little approach within RDA under this, with this orientation, is open to society. And there has been a lot of push for quite many years for researchers from PhD to later to have, for example, an abstract of the project or of the results that can be read by the public, by anybody. And this is also part of open science. You have to also to turn to society. And I think that what I said, look a bit further for your nose, is valid for researchers, it's valid for any of the actors, and I would like this group contribute to that. And on my second point, and final one for my part, is this recommendation, which are for the moment bullet points and tables, as you have seen in these slides and the links, will need to be worked out and reached by all your contributions and others and circulate and so on. But then they will have to reach out the good actors. And of course, you can help each of you and others from your networks, your world, to reach the good actors, because recommendations that stay in a computer are not very useful if they only do that.
The evaluation research interest group can help that, probably.
Of course, yes. The new group, where there was a BOF session yesterday about evaluation of research, can certainly help for a number of these actors. But each of you probably can give us some idea, email, whatever, that could help. Because if you came here, it's because you are interested by the topic. And if you can contribute to it, I think that would be a good reward to have contributed if something is used. Thank you very much.
Hannah has been in the Zoom call and amazingly sharing a lot of links. So thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Now they're going to the airport.
Now they go